2024 has been an odd year for me. Kicking off my second year of content creation, I was eager and excited about all the possibilities for the channel. But then a pretty major event in April turned my whole world upside down. Because of that, I couldn't stick to one lofty goal I set at the start of the year. Let's roll the clip. A goal I have in 2024 is to play more games that release in 2024. By my calculations, I only played 4 games from 2024. Well, technically 5 if you count Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which I'm currently playing right now. Yeah, I'd hoped to tackle more games from this year, but life had other plans. Despite that, I platinumed a total of 32 games this year, the most I've ever achieved in a single year. So to celebrate, I wanted to highlight my favorite platinums I earned in 2024. I originally had bigger plans for an end of the year celebration, but I've decided to save that for another time. For now, we're sticking with a classic top 10 list, complete with a few honorable mentions toward the end. Before we dive in though, I want to give a massive thank you to everyone who's been a part of the journey, whether you've been here since the beginning or joined along the way. This year's been a roller coaster, but you all kept me motivated and I couldn't be more grateful. Now, onto the list.
Number 10. Star Wars Episode 1 Racer.
Coming in at number 10 is Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. I originally picked this up on a whim to round out my May the 4th video, but it ended up being way more fun than I expected. Taking one of the best aspects of the Phantom Menace and turning it into a full-fledged racing game, turned out that's something I never knew I needed. This was my first time experiencing Episode 1 Racer in all its glory. As I mentioned in its respective video, I wasn't born yet when it originally came out, so I didn't have any nostalgia fueling this game. But even without that sentimental attachment, I was blown away by how well the game holds up today. Sure, the graphics have aged, no surprise there, but the controls? Taking charge of a pod racer still feels incredibly smooth even 25 years later. The platinum for this game is short and sweet, taking only a couple of play sessions to knock out, and honestly, that's always refreshing. Aside from a couple of races that took me a bit longer to complete, nothing about this trophy list felt tedious or exhausting. There was no filler designed to inflate an arbitrary completion time. Just straightforward objectives like completing races, unlocking pod racers, and upgrading your pod. Simple, satisfying, and an excellent starting point for this list. One cool thing I noticed while playing is how the game gave me a deeper appreciation for the pod racing scene in The Phantom Menace. I played this just a week or so before rewatching the movie in theaters, and during the pod race, I recognized some of the racers' names because of the game. That connection was a cool little bonus to an already great experience.
Number 9. X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Next up is X-Men Origins Wolverine, a game that took me by surprise. I had always heard that this was not only better than the movie, but also one of the best movie tie-in games out there. Playing it for myself proved exactly why that reputation holds up. Controlling Logan as he tore through enemies limb by limb was the ultimate power fantasy. This is a brutally awesome hack and slash that fully embraces the wrath and destruction Wolverine is capable of. Honestly, giving a game based on a PG-13 movie an M rating was the smartest decision they could have made. At times, it didn't even feel like I was playing through a game tied to a mediocre movie. It was just pure, unfiltered fun from a bygone era of gaming. The trophy list? Just as exceptional as the gameplay. Sure, there were a few grindy elements like endlessly slashing through enemies to max out stats, or replaying everything on hard, which meant throwing away all my progress, but even with those challenges, I had an absolute blast revisiting this hidden gem. X-Men Origins Wolverine truly stands out as one of the better Marvel games of its time, and the platinum was the perfect cherry on top of an already stellar experience.
Number 8. Gotham Knights.
This might be a hot take, but I actually enjoyed Gotham Knights. Now, hear me out. Coming off my platinum run of the Arkham series, I wasn't sure how I'd feel about this game. All the reviews and word of mouth turned me off at the time, but I was still intrigued to check it out. When I did get around to it, Gotham Knights just seemed to hit me at the right time. It might sound silly, but when I was going for the platinum, my life felt incredibly organized. Wake up, go to work, hit the gym, and then defend Gotham for a couple of hours. There was something oddly satisfying about the routine that made my experience with Gotham Knights memorable. Now, I'm not saying it's an amazing game, far from it, but I also don't think it deserves as much hate as it gets. While there's no defending the combat or the fact that it's locked at 30 frames per second, I found the story engaging and loved exploring Gotham night after night. That sense of discovery gave the game its own identity and provided a refreshing change of pace from the Arkham series. As for the platinum, I actually enjoyed the grind for the most part. Sure, there are a few trophies that tested my patience. Still don't know who thought stopping 250 crimes would be fun, and the DLC trophies can be frustrating depending on how you approach them. But outside of those annoyances, I had a surprisingly good time working through it. I get that Gotham Knights isn't for everyone, but for me, it hit just right at the beginning of the year.
Number 7. Star Wars Outlaws.
We're not done with the hot takes just yet because I also really enjoyed my time with Star Wars Outlaws. I know Ubisoft doesn't have the best track record among gamers right now, but that didn't dampen my excitement for this game. I mean, I dropped over $100 to play this early, which is something I have never done before. As for the game, I thoroughly enjoyed what Massive Entertainment delivered. K-Verse's journey across 4 distinct planets during a fascinating era in Star Wars history was incredibly captivating. The open world, or rather open worlds, felt thoughtfully designed. Unlike other Ubisoft games, my screen wasn't cluttered with an overwhelming number of icons. Instead, there were compelling reasons to explore, like the upgrade system, which encouraged me to go out of my way for meaningful rewards that paid off in the long run. When it comes to getting the platinum, this was one of the more engaging trophy lists I tackled in 2024. It pushed me to try things I wouldn't have done otherwise and never felt like a grind. Well, except for the capital ship trophy. That one was a pain. But overall, the list kept me invested and got me out of my comfort zone at times. Much like Jedi Survivor, I did not want to leave this world. Even if I had not planned on covering it for the channel, I still would have gone for the platinum. That said, I placed it so low because of a bugged trophy that made the platinum unattainable for nearly 2 weeks. While it didn't ruin my experience, it was frustrating at the time. Despite the divisive response at launch, I have found some positivity within the community, which has been refreshing. Star Wars is in a strange place right now, but I genuinely believe Outlaws is one of the better pieces of content we've had, at least this year. It's no Jedi Survivor, but it's also far from the typical Ubisoft fare that we have grown used to. If you haven't played Outlaws or gave up on it early on, I highly recommend giving it another shot, especially in the state it's in now.
Number 6. Vampire Survivors.
Vampire Survivors is a bit of a wild card for this list since I never got around to covering it on the channel. However, when I saw it was coming to PlayStation, I knew I couldn't pass up on the chance to platinum one of my favorite games from the past few years. For those who don't know, Vampire Survivors is a roguelike shoot 'em up where your goal is to survive hordes of increasingly tough enemies for as long as you can. I first heard about this game a couple of years ago on a podcast and decided to give it a try on my phone. What started as casual curiosity quickly turned into an obsession. I was hooked on its simple yet incredibly engaging gameplay loop. Whenever I had a long car ride or needed to kill some time, Vampire Survivors was my go-to. When it launched on PS5 in August, I did not hesitate to double dip and dive straight into my platinum journey. Despite its straightforward mechanics, the gameplay is ridiculously addictive. I constantly found myself saying just one more run, even if that run would take another 30 minutes. The platinum for Vampire Survivors is surprisingly easy given how much content is in the game. While the base game comes with 41 trophies, the full game has a staggering 221 trophies, most of which are categorized as DLC. Thankfully, you only need to buy a few, priced reasonably low, to fully 100% the game. And let me tell you, I was unlocking so many trophies at a time that I actually hit the notification cap. It's 4 for those wondering. I played so much Vampire Survivors on PS5 that going back to the mobile version will be incredibly difficult. That's how much I enjoyed it. If I had to pick one game from this list to recommend, it would be Vampire Survivors. It's simple, fun, and dangerously addictive. If you haven't played it yet, you're seriously missing out.
Number 5. Destroy All Humans 2 Reprobed.
Destroy All Humans 2 Reprobed turned out to be an incredibly fun experience, which surprised me at the time. The reason for that was based on my playthrough of the first Destroy All Humans remake. After a bug ruined my experience, I was a little burnt out on the series. It got to the point where I seriously questioned if trophy hunting was even worth it. Even though I enjoyed my experience with the original Destroy All Humans 2, seeing mixed reviews for Reprobed didn't help, so I put off playing it for a long time. Thankfully, my doubts disappeared the moment I started. Right from the beginning, it was clear this was going to be a much better experience than the first remake. While Reprobed is essentially the same game at its core, it takes everything the original and first remake improved upon and adds even more polish and features, making this the definitive way to experience Crypto's second adventure. The cast of characters felt more lively, the locations were vibrant and brimming with personality, and the gameplay had a level of refinement that made it hard to put down. Once I got into the flow and re-engaged with the story, I poured hours into what I'd argue is the best entry in the series, remake or original. The trophy list for Reprobed is relatively straightforward, just like the first game. Most of the trophies can be earned pretty quickly, but there is a bit of a grind when it comes to completing all the odd jobs. Fortunately, the improvements in this remake made even those tasks more enjoyable to get through. Reprobed exceeded all my expectations, and I'm so glad I gave it a shot.
Number 4. Alien Isolation.
If there is one game that pulled me completely out of my comfort zone this year, it was Alien Isolation. I've been slowly dipping my toes into horror games, and while I've always enjoyed the Alien movies, I never seriously considered playing Isolation until two things happened. One, I saw Alien Romulus, and two, I realized the game's 10-year anniversary was just around the corner. At first, the journey got off to a slow start, playing bits and pieces in August and September, but by October, I was fully immersed, knocking out most of the trophy list over the course of a single weekend. While the story of Isolation sometimes overstays its welcome, it's still an engrossing experience that had me hooked. You can't help but feel for Amanda Ripley as she endures the horrors of Sevastopol Station. The true standout though is the game's highly intelligent xenomorph, which more than lives up to its reputation. Every encounter with it was nerve-wracking. Even when I thought I had its behavior figured out, it always found new ways to surprise me and forced me to rethink my approach. What truly sold me on the experience though was the atmosphere. Sevastopol Station feels utterly desolate. There's a pervasive sense of helplessness as you scramble to either rid the station of the xenomorph or simply live long enough to escape. The sound design is where the game truly shines. From the ominous music to the xenomorph's footsteps, blaring alarms, and the random creaks and groans of the station, every sound worked together to fully immerse me in the experience. Alien Isolation is nothing short of a masterclass in sound design. As for the platinum, it's a relatively straightforward endeavor. Most of the trophies can be earned naturally in a single playthrough, depending on your approach, and experimenting with different playstyles was always fun. The only trophy that sticks out as unnatural, depending on how you play of course, is dying to the xenomorph 100 times. Other than that, this is a great list to get through. If I had more time, I even would have loved to have attempted a nightmare difficulty, no death run, as that seems like the ultimate way to experience this game. For now though, Alien Isolation stands out as an incredibly rewarding platinum in a genre I'm still getting to know.
Number 3. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown.
Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown deserved better. From the moment it was announced, it became one of my most anticipated games of the year, and it did not disappoint. As someone who's slowly getting into Metroidvanias, I feel absolutely spoiled after playing The Lost Crown. Not only was this my first Prince of Persia game, but it also ended up being my game of the year for most of 2024. The game's Metroidvania elements are brilliantly integrated into its incredible story, delivering moments that left me with chills. But what truly caught me off guard was the combat. I haven't played many combat-heavy 2D games, and the few I have didn't fully click with me. Looking at you, Arkham Origins Blackgate. The Lost Crown, however, nailed it. The combat feels precise and rewarding, and the boss fights unexpectedly became a major highlight. The difficulty threw me off at first, but once I embraced the challenge, it turned into one of the game's strongest aspects. Exploring the beautifully crafted world and hunting for collectibles showcased some of the best level design I've experienced in years. Every new area and discovery felt meaningful and satisfying, pulling me deeper into the game's world. As for the platinum, it is a shorter one on this list in terms of trophies, but it was amazing to get through. It encouraged me to fully embrace everything the game offers, from completing its diverse side missions to unlocking new parts of the map. Every task felt meaningful and rewarding, making this platinum journey a joy rather than a grind. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is arguably the most underrated game of 2024, and possibly one of Ubisoft's best games in years. It's heartbreaking to think about what happened to the studio behind it. I truly wish more people had given this game a chance.
Number 2. Astro Bot.
It's no surprise that Astro Bot ranks so high on this list. From its very first trailer, I knew it was going to be something special, but I didn't expect it to become my personal game of the year. Granted, I haven't played a ton of this year's new releases, but even based on what I've seen and heard, I'm confident Astro Bot would have still claimed a top spot on this list. Astro Bot takes everything that made Playroom great and elevates it exponentially. Navigating through each of the game's colorful levels, utilizing wacky power-ups, and finding iconic PlayStation bots was an absolute blast. Platformers aren't typically my go-to genre, but Astro always seems to hit, and this time it came at just the right moment. See, life felt a little gloomy at the time, and I was in the middle of tackling some bigger, more demanding games. Astro Bot provided a refreshing kickback, as this was something lighthearted and simple. There's no overarching narrative to stress over, and the trophy list isn't complicated, two aspects I appreciated immensely. As I've mentioned before, I never see an easy trophy list as a bad thing. Sometimes you just need a low-stakes, fun experience to balance things out. Honestly, I would have completed this game 100% even without any trophies. That's just the kind of game it is. Each level felt unique, featuring power-ups that changed the level design in clever and exciting ways. The challenge levels also added an extra layer of fun and variety, keeping the gameplay fresh throughout. Just like Playroom, this was another fun trip through PlayStation's history, featuring characters we've come to love, along with some absolute deep cuts. Astro Bot is a special game that deserved the recognition it deserved this year. Sure, some people, my dad included, might brush it off as a kid's game, but that didn't stop me from having the best time with one of the year's best titles. This easily would have been my favorite platinum of 2024, but there's another game that surpassed it and became one of my favorite platinums of all time. Before diving into the number one spot, I want to take a moment to shout out a few games that didn't quite make the cut. These are platinums I genuinely enjoyed earning, but they either weren't strong enough to crack the list or had specific issues that detracted from the experience. That said, there is one exception here, which I'll explain later. Let's dive in, starting with a controversial title, Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League. I know this game ended up being one of the more disappointing releases of 2024. Some would even consider it as one of the worst. While I was hoping for more, I still had fun earning this platinum. The story had some enjoyable moments, and I thoroughly liked the combat system and traversal mechanics. However, for a game of this scope, the experience didn't quite stick with me. I platinumed it in its first week and quickly moved on. Next is the Destroy All Humans remake. I really enjoyed this version, which updated the gameplay and aesthetic of the original while keeping the story intact. It's a solid remake with an easy trophy list. Unfortunately, my experience was soured by a game-breaking bug that corrupted my save file just an hour before I would have unlocked the platinum. It left a frustrating blemish on what was otherwise a fun journey. Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection was a surprise release this year. Revisiting a true classic was fun, but when you break down the trophy list, it's pretty basic. Most of the trophies are focused on Battlefront 2 and involve leveling up various classes. As a result, I ended up playing the game in a way that isn't entirely natural. It also doesn't help that I was trying to platinum this during arguably one of the most stressful moments of my life. Finally, we have Alan Wake 2, one of my favorite games of 2023. This game is the culmination of everything Remedy has worked on, coming together to create something truly special. While I started earning the trophies back in 2023, I didn't get the platinum until this year. Honestly, this is just an excuse to gush about Alan Wake 2 a little more. It's such a phenomenal game, and I highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't played it yet. Really quick, I wanted to include a couple of last-minute honorable mentions. These didn't make the original list because I didn't create videos on them. I do plan on it soon though. But as I worked on this project, I kept thinking they deserved a shout out. Saints Row the Third. I've been itching to dive back into the Saints Row series, and I figured the third game would be a great starting point. I still think this has the best trophy list in the series, striking a perfect balance that highlights everything the game has to offer. It's incredibly wacky, but doesn't go quite off the rails like Saints Row 4. However, since this is my second time getting the platinum, I didn't feel it needed to be on the main list. That said, it was still an amazingly fun time with a trophy hunt that never gets old. And then we have the LEGO Ninjago movie video game. I've been playing through some LEGO games for a series I have planned down the line, and I'll admit, I wasn't a big Ninjago kid. Based on my experience with the LEGO movie video game, my expectations were pretty low for this one. But to my surprise, this turned out to be one of the better LEGO games I've played. It sticks to the classic LEGO formula, but the revamped combat system was a standout feature that I thoroughly enjoyed. Definitely an unexpected gem among the more recent LEGO games. That wraps up all the honorable mentions, so let's dive into my favorite platinum of 2024.
Number 1. Catherine Fullbody.
Catherine Fullbody is without a doubt my favorite platinum of 2024. This game was an unexpected hit for me. When I started, I knew next to nothing about it. I didn't even understand the hype around its infamous difficulty. I picked it up on a whim and quickly became engrossed in both its narrative and gameplay. It was unlike anything I'd ever played before. My first playthrough was fantastic. However, it wasn't until afterward that I began to understand the true challenge of this platinum. A seemingly simple in-game arcade game took me days to complete. Babel, a set of 4 additional stages, was brutally difficult and took me weeks to conquer. And let's not forget about earning gold prizes across every difficulty and mode in the game's 10 stages, an undertaking that stretched over several months. On paper, this trophy list might seem grindy and tedious, so some of you might wonder why it takes the top spot for me. The answer is simple: it's about the journey. If there's one thing this platinum taught me, it's to never give up. I know that sounds a bit cliche, but hear me out. These days, since platinums are the main focus of my channel, I try my hardest not to drop a platinum once I start it, unless I'm genuinely not having fun with the game. With Catherine Fullbody, there are moments when I came dangerously close to quitting. There were times when I questioned whether the grind was worth it, but by learning to be patient and giving myself the space to take breaks when needed, I managed to persevere. After 8 long months, I eventually conquered one of the most challenging and rewarding platinums I've ever earned. I'll always be grateful that I gave Catherine a chance and stuck with it throughout the struggle. It was, without a question, one of my favorite gaming experiences this year. And with that, these are some of my favorite platinums of 2024. It's been an interesting year, filled with a ton of variety. I got to experience some massive large-scale titles, genres I'm still a novice to, and gems that first launched a decade ago. While this year didn't go exactly as I had planned, I'm still incredibly grateful for the games I got to experience and share with you all on the channel. I hope you've enjoyed the content as much as I've enjoyed creating it. Now it's your turn. What were some of your favorite platinums of 2024? And which games are you most excited to tackle in the upcoming year? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.